What's up, everyone? We are live at 5 here at Broadway.com. It is Wednesday, November 6th. I'm Paul Torek.
I'm Beth Stevens.
And we're joined by Caitlin Moynihan.
Hello.
Oh, we got the jazz hands today.
Jazz
Thank you
hands
for
are
that.
back.
That's in honor of the Search for Roxy.
It is.
By the way, go online and vote for that.
Yes.
Hey, Beth, someone I really like is here today, Mr. Andy Señor. He has made an amazing documentary film, and I can't wait for everybody to hear about it. And we're going to talk all about it, but first, today's top 5.
We got some more casting news for this upcoming Broadway musical.
We've been waiting for the complete cast of Girl from the North Country, and now
You love this show. I missed
loved
it off-Broadway.
this show, and this part is such
So
a great
good.
part.
Oh.
Austin Scott will be joining the Broadway company of Girl from the North Country.
A.K.A. Hamilton.
AKA Hamilton. I was getting there. He will play Joe Scott, so it just seems like
Easy.
destiny. Seems like destiny. Interestingly, this part was originally played by Sidney James Harcourt, who was also in Hamilton. It's a Hamilton-type role. You know him as Hamilton, but also he was off Broadway in One Day, and he made an appearance on Pose, on FX. This is a great role. This is a great show.
in a Speedo.
Yes.
Correct?
Correct.
I Googled it.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks for the detail work. Fact checking. The Girl from the North Country will play the Belasco Theater beginning on February 7th, and opening night is set for March 5th.
Wow, yes. And we got a really cute children's novel that is going to make its stage debut.
You know, everyone's thinking about the Clintons these days. As always.
Yes,
As always.
Well, we love
Since
Chelsea
1992.
Clinton. She's up to a lot of things, and she wrote a children's book I don't know how long ago, called She Persisted. And now they're making a musical out of it, which is sort of a fun thing I didn't really expect to happen. The Atlantic Theater Company is producing this. M.K. Lawson will direct and choreograph, and it features a book by Adam Tobin and music by Deborah Wicks La Puma. So the musical is set as fourth grader Naomi's field trip to a women's history museum.
Yeah.
There aren't a lot of women's history museums, are there?
I've never been to
Not
one.
enough, at least.
Well, Naomi's
Thanks,
going to
Caitlin.
one. And it turns into a time travel adventure where she encounters inspirational women overcoming barriers and making waves. This is part of the Atlantic for Kids program. And performances will run Saturday and Sunday. You should take your kids.
I will.
Your daughter would love it.
Definitely.
She'd be all over it.
You know, the Clintons love theater, I have to say.
Oh my God, we know. I mean, big theater fans. So it's running February 22nd through March 15th at the Linda Gross Theater. And casting will be announced at a future date.
Fun.
And audiences went under the sea last night and loved it.
Did you guys all watch Little Mermaid live last night? Did y'all watch it?
I
did.
fast forwarded through the movie clips. I wanted to see the performances. Well, they like showed numbers and then they showed like
Yeah.
long chunks of the movie. I've seen the movie.
You've seen it, good.
I wanted to see
well,
the theatrical
the answer is
magic.
that yes, a lot of people went
lot of
under the
people
sea
watched
because 9 million viewers. That's a lot.
Yeah.
9 million viewers. That's an increase from TV's most recent live musical, Rent Live, which had 3.4 million
You know who
viewers.
knows about Rent?
I was
Today's
I was
guest,
seeing
Andy
when you were going to
Señor.
say that. Thank you. Jesus Christ
Stay
Superstar
tuned.
had 9.6 million musical lovers, is what this says. It's just to give you some perspective. Of course, the first one had the most.
Sound
that was
Music
Sound of Music
Live.
had 18.6.
Oof.
Yes.
This one was very different, though.
This was not
There was really just certain numbers they did. And
in
they showed a lot of
costume,
the
and
movie.
Queen Latifah did the Ursula thing.
they showed the wig. John Stamos made a dirty... Yeah, anyway, he did like an ad lib.
He did a
Anyway.
weird thing.
Oh, I
Well,
need to go
the
back
kids
and do my
didn't get it.
research.
Well,
Well, 9 million of them saw it, so there you go.
definitely. Yes, and I'm already planning my August trip to go to the Muni next year.
Are you really? Because I've never been to the
Yes.
Muni.
I gotta
You're
go.
going?
I gotta go to see the show that they announced.
Okay, well, the Muni is that enormous outdoor theater that everyone... What's that, St. Louis? St.
Yes.
Louis? Meet me in St. Louis?
Do you have to say it
Because
that
they
way?
did it last year intentionally. This year is their 102nd season. That's crazy.
wild.
They are doing On Your Feet. You know who knows about On Your Feet?
Who?
Today's guest, Andy
okay.
Señor.
Well, there you go.
That's running in August. Also, Chicago, Mary Poppins, Sweeney Todd, Smokey Joe's Cafe, The Sound of Music, and Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. Casting is sure to include a lot of Broadway favorites.
Always.
Because it always does. And that will be announced at a later date.
Yes, and put on your dancing shoes because we got the date for the Cheetah Rivera Awards.
The Cheetah Rivera Awards honor choreography.
We have to put our dancing shoes on now?
Yes,
dancing.
the whole
I am
time.
not putting on my dancing shoes. However, they honor choreography, featured dancers, and ensembles. And the nominations will be announced on April 24th. The ceremony will be on May 17th at NYU's Skirball Center for the Performing Arts. This, of course, was was called the Astaire Awards. Now it's the Chita Rivera Awards for 4 years now.
Right.
There you go.
So we don't have to keep saying that.
But I want to let people know what it is in case you haven't been keeping up. It's the
past
Cheetah
4 years.
Awards
So also on the site, Jen Colella is leaving Come From Away. That
on
can't
Sunday.
happen. That's really happy. We allowed that? That's happening?
It slipped through our fingers. Yes.
So she did an exit interview. We also have a first look at Tina, the Tina Turner musical, which is already getting so much buzz.
Opening
Opens
tomorrow.
tomorrow.
It opens tomorrow, and photos of the Mean Girls tour, and do you want me to keep saying this? Photos of
Yes.
the Disney concert, the 25th anniversary celebration, and photos of Broadway Salutes, which honors long-running individuals in the industry who
Yes.
aren't the type that are eligible for Tony Awards.
Correct, but it was hosted by
Sometimes.
Brian Stokes Mitchell, who has a Tony Award.
And Jerome Kane,
Yes.
who works here,
Broadway.com.
got honored with one for 35 years of service or something. Anyway,
Cute.
so
Awesome.
congratulations, Jerome. That's it. Thank you so much, Beth.
Thank you.
Hey, Caitlin, tell everyone about
Yes.
today's guest.
Definitely. Yes, we got Andy Señor here with us in this studio. As Paul said, he's here to talk all about his incredible documentary about bringing Rent to Havana and what all that ensued and all the incredible things that happened. He was in Rent on the Broadway. And as we said earlier, he was an associate director for On Your Feet. And he also was an associate director for Holiday Inn. He's been a really busy guy. Make sure you follow him on social media at Andy Señor Jr. Leave all of your questions in the comments below. And everyone, please welcome Andy and Paul.
Thank you, Caitlin.
Yay!
Caitlin, hello,
Good to
hello.
see you.
Good to see you as
I always
well.
like how you rock a hat.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like my signature thing.
Yeah, it's your thing now.
Yeah.
How are you? I haven't seen you in a while.
I'm good. I'm a a little jet lagged because I live
Okay.
in Europe now.
I
but
know.
yeah,
you
I'm
you
very
live in
happy to be here.
Barcelona.
I live in
Where are you
Barcelona.
going? Did people say that to you when you told them you were moving?
Yes.
there?
My musical theater friends did.
the
yes.
one musical theater reference.
Exactly.
That's crazy. You're there. Are you enjoying it?
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. My grandfather was from Spain. My
Okay.
whole family on my mother's side is from Spain. So I'm connecting with all my cousins and my
Cool.
family there. So it's been great.
And you speak Spanish.
Perfectamente.
Which helps.
Sí.
That also came in handy when you went to La Habana, Cuba.
La Habana, Cuba.
So this is quite an adventure. Let's talk about this. I've known about this project for a while.
Yeah.
Since you first you told me about it really early on. So you went to Cuba to direct Rent. You, of course, you
Yes.
played Angel. You were a fantastic Angel, by the way, in Rent. You had a pretty. I saw you do it in London. In addition,
The first time you saw me was in London. Yeah.
right? And you had a long journey with it.
Yes, I
right?
started. I started as Steve in
The squeegee guy.
the Squeegee guy,
Yeah,
Will I
Squeegee
Solo,
guy.
in the La Jolla production, and then we took that to L.A. at the Amundsen.
Yes.
And that's when I took over for Angel.
Right.
And
That was
then,
Neil Patrick Harris when he first did it. at La
exactly,
Jolla,
and
right.
Wilson Cruz. I was Wilson Cruz's understudy.
Okay. Uh-huh.
And then went to London. After London, went to Broadway. Then we did some crazy tour through all of Asia, and then went back to Broadway, and then did that final production, the farewell tour, we like to call it.
Right. So you know your Rent.
I know my rent.
In and out.
Yes, yes. very
So,
well.
and you have been developing a great directorial career. I know I
Yeah.
mentioned On Your Feet earlier, but you were associate director on that, and also Holiday Inn, as Caitlin
As well.
mentioned.
Yep.
And so you went to Cuba and directed Rent, and now you've made a documentary about the entire experience.
Yeah, I've always been videotaping and taking photos all through my journey
Yeah.
with the show. When I was doing the show in London, during intermission, not intermission, sorry, during in between shows, they bombed one of the gay bars down
Oh,
the street
wow.
from where we were doing Rent.
Wow.
And yeah, it was a really big deal when I came to Broadway. 9/11 happened, and that it was the whole
Wow.
aftermath of that. And then when we did the Asia tour, the bird flu was going on. So when the Cuban government asked me to go do Rent there, I was like, I'm gonna take a camera with me, because
So the Cuban government, that's a loaded statement, what you just said.
Yeah.
The Cuban government asked me to do Rent. I've been
Yes.
to Cuba, and you don't walk around the streets and see productions like Rent playing.
No,
There's
so-
very when I went to Cuba, it was very classic theater
Yes.
things happening there.
Yes. So basically, the Nederlander organization, Nederlander Worldwide, and
Right.
Bob Nederlander, they were doing a program with the Cuban Ministry of Culture, which there is the Cuban government, to create programs that are Broadway oriented, just to bridge those the cultural divides.
Yeah.
And so they after doing one particular program, they wanted to do a Broadway musical. And then Mariela Castro, who was the president's daughter at that time, chose Rent.
Wow. Oh, that's what
She
happened.
chose Rent, yeah.
And
she
fan of Rent?
Yes,
Okay.
and she also really supports a lot of the gay rights on the island, and she thought Rent was an appropriate show for what she
So they wanted to
wanted.
shake things up.
They wanted to shake things up.
Yeah, and give the people something
Absolutely.
different. Okay, so you went down there with your camera.
I went down there with Victor Patrick Alvarez.
Yes.
It was very hard for me to find someone that would come with me and film. We didn't know what we were really getting into.
He's your co-director.
He's my co-director.
On the film, and he also is
Yes.
cinematographer, right?
And he's also Cuban American.
Okay.
My family was very much against me making the decision.
Let's
to
talk
go.
about this.
Yes.
I know a lot. I'm friends with a lot of Cuban Americans.
Yes.
It's even when I went to Cuba just to visit it, because I love the Cuban people and I wanted to visit the island. It's a very loaded thing to tell people, a Cuban American, that you're going there. There's a lot of emotions tied to it. Can you just sort of like explain that to people who maybe don't understand the history and just really like what it meant to your family?
Yeah. So basically, from a personal perspective, my parents left during the revolution,
Right.
and when they
late 50s.
in the late 50s, 59. My dad left in 59. My mom left in late 60s.
Okay.
And they basically vowed never to return again until the Castros were out,
Right.
and until they were gone, and it was a free democratic country. And in the community that I grew up in Miami, Florida, that's the sentiment. You know, you don't, you know, you're anti engagement with Cuba, and you don't travel there. That's basic. That's the gist. I've always been incredibly curious about going, especially as my parents got older. In that community, you talk a lot about, because it was the best beach and my house, and you talk a lot about, about Cuba since you can't go. And I really wanted to go. I wanted to see it for myself. And as far as Rent is concerned, having done it, all those different companies all over the world, and doing it for so many different people all over the world, all those audiences, how could I not go do it in Cuba? For my own culture.
Right.
It felt it would feel ridiculous to not do that.
So the two of you went down there,
Yeah.
and you had to cast it. We
We had to cast the
you
show.
You had to build the show.
Yeah, we didn't know what the talent pool was.
Right.
At first, it was like, can we do the show here? What is the talent pool? They lost the tradition of musical theater, and it had been 50 years since an American Broadway company came in and did a musical.
Wow.
A lot of the musicals that they did were like they would lip sync the shows, or they would do partial, but there was no real tradition of musical theater that had been lost. So, during those first auditions, which Michael Greif, the original director, actually came. He was like, "Andy, I'm coming with you."
Amazing. Yeah.
So he was sitting there for those auditions. They were singing, Cuban boleros for Rent. They came in, because they think a Broadway company's coming in, so they were wearing beautiful satin dresses with high heels and pearls.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, that's not what this show
Right.
is.
Right.
So the documentary actually really captures our attempts to cast the show in the beginning, and then really goes into the people that we find.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing, and they all have amazing stories. And
They each.
what year was this, by the way?
This was in 2014, so this was pre-Obama normalization relation
Right.
with Cuba.
Right.
So we were able to cast the show. We found some incredible Cuban artists because it was all Cuban, and the show was in Spanish.
What was the easiest role to cast?
The easiest role to cast was Angel.
Ah, well, your angels.
Yes,
You were like,
absolutely.
that's Angel.
Yes, there were lots of people that we could choose, and Mimi's as well, which is
Okay.
usually here in the United States. It's always it was during that time. It was very hard to find angels and Mimis. But in Cuba, it was there was lots of people to choose.
Wow.
The hardest was Roger.
Interesting.
That was to find an actor that can, first of all, an actor that can also sing, and be able to sing to the range in which Roger sings his songs is very difficult because they don't really sing high, and that's not their tradition in Cuba. They're it's those boleros don't have that much range. So
Yeah. So how was the show? How did it? I mean,
we sold out. It ran for 3 months.
what did the people think? What
The
was
people
it like?
loved it.
So did they know Rent? Or did
They
any
didn't know
of-
Rent.
It was just sort of like something coming in with no.
Yes, they thought, it was like, oh, it's an American Broadway musical coming in. We transformed.
Like Kiss Me Kate.
Yeah, right. No, we transformed this a former synagogue that turned into a theater, and then we transformed. Because there weren't any resources, so we used scaffolding. It was very much like the original workshop, New York Theater Workshop production.
Wow.
Because we couldn't bring in any money. We couldn't.
Yeah.
We had to make do with what was there and be creative. So it was very much in the spirit of the original production off Broadway.
How emotional was this trip for you? Because I know the movie also documents your personal story.
Yes.
Because it's partly about building the show, but also
Yeah.
about what you talked about, your family history. And what was the experience of being there like for you?
For me, when the plane was going down and I was looking out the window, I couldn't stop thinking of my dad. My dad had passed in 2005, and I couldn't stop thinking what he would think, and just what his opinion would be. But in my heart, I knew that he would be incredibly proud. So it was very emotional for me. And then my first meetings, I was sitting there with all these like Cuban officials, and I was just like, I couldn't believe that I was sitting in Havana with these people. And then the woman who was in charge of the theater department of the Ministry of Culture, she looks at me and she says, "You are the future of musical theater in Cuba." And she just says that to me, and I'm like, what?
Wow.
It was very humbling, and I think it was the most purposeful moment of my life. It felt like everything that I had done in my life had just joined at that particular moment, and I just felt like that's the word. I felt really on purpose in a miraculous kind of way. It was beautiful.
I've been lucky enough to see a lot of the movie. I didn't see the finished movie yet, but you had so much footage to go through, and you really
Yes.
had to create a movie out of this. What was that process like?
That was hard because you have to create a movie that for people who know Rent and don't know Rent.
Right.
You have to create a movie for people who know Cuban politics and don't know Cuban politics.
Yeah.
And then following me, and some people, most people have no idea who I am. So you have to create me as a compelling character to be able to follow. And these are all things that are very separate and don't relate to each other. So to be able to create a 90-minute film that follows all those themes was very, very difficult and took a really long time to do and to perfect it. And we're still in the process of it.
How has Cuba changed in the last 5 years?
Well, the great thing was 7 days before we opened on December 24th in 2014, and on December 17th, 2014, Obama made the declaration of normalization. So we were actually there in rehearsal during that moment, and in the documentary, it captures it live.
Amazing!
Well, you see us watching it, and it was a breakthrough moment. That was not gonna happen.
Right.
So it was
wasn't in the
spectacular.
script.
That was not in the script. That was not going to happen. And then when the American delegates came in to meet the Cuban delegates to begin the normalization talks, the cast sang Seasons of Love to set the tone for the normalization talks. And so I think at that particular time and that moment, a lot of the Cubans started getting really hopeful that things were changing, and the promise of something new and lasting was actually real. And through those years, there was a lot happening. There were like all these fashion shows in Cuba. Cruise ships started coming in. A lot of business started booming, which created issues as well. But there was, in the people, there was hope. When Obama went to Cuba, a black president, and came to Cuba, and they were blown away. And then with the new regime, American regime,
Yes.
a lot of those cultural programs stopped,
Yeah.
and a lot of the travel got restricted, and so it took a massive step backwards.
Yeah.
And just 2 days ago, it was announced further cuts in cultural programs between the U.S. and Cuba.
Wow. Now, do you, when you see the movie, you really fall in love with your cast as well?
Yeah.
How do you keep in touch with everyone? And
Yes,
how
a
are
lot
they?
of the Cubans actually, the Mark and the Roger, they ended up staying in the United States, and the Mark, the guy who played Mark, his name is Mario. He ended up moving in with my mom
Ah,
in Miami because he had nowhere to stay, so he moved in
Wow.
with my mom, and then he's now on this Spanish television. Singing on TV.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, one of the other actresses, her name is Claudia, who's in the show, Claudia Mulet. I cast her in On Your Feet on the tour.
Amazing.
And then some of the other actors that stayed in Cuba, they're still doing musical theater and so forth. And my hope is to continue creating programs that bring musical theater to Cuba
Right.
because it all just stopped.
Oh, so the movie is done. It's called Revolution Rent.
Revolution Rent.
Revolution Rent.
Yeah.
And it's playing. It's part of a film festival.
Yeah, it's part of Doc NYC. It's the premiere of the film.
Cool.
And we'll still continue working on it.
Yeah.
Past it
Yeah.
as we go to hopefully to other festivals.
Right.
But yeah, it's on Friday at 9:30 at Doc NYC.
Yeah, I was excited when I heard you were coming to town, just because I love this project so much, and I really wanted everyone to. I want Buzz to build about this. It's a beautiful movie. I think the screening is sold out. I saw, but there's like a there's like a
Standby list.
standby line or something. Look it up. You can look it up on the site for the festival, and we'll give you a link to that in our story tomorrow.
Yes.
Hey, Caitlin. What are
Yes.
people online saying to Andy?
Yes, definitely. So Alec wants to know, how does it feel like after all these years of creating it and bringing it and having people be able to see it to now be able to, be bringing it and showing it in New York now and be able to look back at how far the timing and everything.
Yeah,
of it all.
it's.
You still get emotional watching it?
I don't get emotional watching it now. It's been 5 years.
Yeah.
That we've been working on this,
Yeah.
and I'm just curious to see how an audience reacts to it. I know how my friends react to it, but that's not a typical audience. So I'm more curious than anything. I've gone through the whole world of every emotion with the film, and now it's just I'm at a point from a personal place of just like really wanting to just release it out to the world and see what it does.
Were there things about showing that musical, which I know every word to an audience that didn't know anything about it,
Yeah.
performed by people who didn't really know anything about it? Was there anything they reacted to differently, or did it play differently in any way when when it had all those sort of unknowns?
It didn't play any differently. I think that they really understood because these the lives of the Cuban artists or the Cuban people mirror so closely
Right.
the lives of the
Yeah.
characters in Rent. So when the power blows and they're like, yeah, that happened to me this morning. Actually, during rehearsal, every day there was a power outage, and
Right,
we
so
just
the first
couldn't
scene they
rehearse.
were in,
Yeah, exactly.
like the
So-
power's out, we're in.
Yeah, and they're like, all of our electrical appliances, plug into one thick extension cord. That happens in every Cuban
Yeah.
household in
Right,
Cuba.
right.
So they really understood. They saw themselves in these characters. It wasn't a far stretch for them.
Right.
Love it. We're going to end on this question, which I love it. So Joanne says, Rent was the first Broadway musical that a whole generation of theater fans saw and really connected with. What was that show for you?
For me, it was, wow, when I was watching the Tony Awards, a little Cuban kid in Miami, and I saw them sing Seasons of Love and then do La Vie Boheme, and then I saw Wilson Heredia win the Tony Award. And he looked like me. I was like, it was the first time after watching many Tonys that I saw a Hispanic
Yeah.
guy win an award. For me, it was the opening of what was possible. It made it possible for me. And then when I waited for the CD to come out, and then listening to the CD, a lot of my frustrations of my generation, I heard and I felt in the music, and I knew what the show was in my body. And I had to be a part of it, and now it's like not only a part of it, but I've just like made a whole life out of it.
Yeah.
And I hope to continue to. It's the musical has a lot of truth in it, and love and connection, and that doesn't get old.
Yeah, that never gets old.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite musicals. Man, I love that show.
You saw him many times. I saw him in the audience all the time. I would see you afterwards.
Me out.
Yeah.
Called you out.
Revolution Rent. If you want to really see it, go get in line
Yeah.
Friday night at the SVA Theater, and then just we'll tell you if future things happen about it. You
Yeah.
can
Or
follow Andy.
follow Revolution Rent on Instagram. It's just Revolution Rent.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool, awesome.
For
Thanks
other
so much for
screenings.
being here.
Thank you
I'm
for
glad
having
you're in
me
New
here.
York.
Yes, I'm happy to
Gracing
be
us
here.
with your presence and going back to beautiful Barcelona.
Yeah.
The nerve. Just in time for the snow. We'll probably get a snowstorm the minute you leave.
I think there's a snowstorm next
I
week.
know there
Yeah, there
is.
is.
Thanks for rubbing it in. Hey, Caitlin,
Yes.
why don't you take everyone out?
Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. We are live at 5 every single weekday here on Facebook. You can listen to us wherever you get your podcast by searching for #live@5 and hitting that subscribe button. Be sure to tune in tomorrow. We talk to Tony winner Leslie Odom Jr. all about his new album, Mr.